Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and have I got a show for you today? This is episode number 267. So we've talked about a lot of stuff on this show, and I didn't think there was any episode that we had ever not covered a different topic until I had lunch with April, and I'm like, I don't think I've ever talked about this on my podcast. So, what do you think about coming on my show? And she was like, yeah, baby, I'm going to get this. So, today, as we craft our meaningful life, we're going to talk about a big piece of our life that we rarely talk about. And that is our physical relationship sexually to ourselves, to our partners, to other people in our community, how we relate, because that is such a huge part of our existence, and yet we talk about it very little and in quiet voices. And so I'd love to welcome you, my expert for today, April. Welcome on.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, April, so how would you describe what you do?
What I do is I really help people connect to their true essence and through moving through the trauma into pleasure and play and experiential,
Mm.
kind of like your podcast name is How to Craft a Meaningful Life and what is meaningful for you. And is that really meaningful for you, or is that what you were told is meaningful for you by society, that you should get married and have two kids and make a bunch of money and then that success, rather than what does
Mm.
your heart or your womb want to experience, want to create. So yeah, I just kind of help people connect to their spark again.
I love that. I may change my title, Crafting a Meaningful Sex Life. I think I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's really kind of what we're going to talk about today. And one of the things that you touched on was that oftentimes our idea of what sex is what's been given to us by our parents or by society or by our friends at school, um, or girl talk, but it's not ever been discussed in this open platform of like, so how do what are some of the things that you experience, and how do you find that joy you're talking about? Because I've never experienced that. We don't ever talk about those things. Well, in my circle of friends, we talk about it, but most circles that I travel in, they really are not talked about. And how do we step past that initial thing of it's okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it is to be embodied. So, Tantra is one of the only spiritual practices that teaches embodiment instead of transcendence. So, like Buddhism and a lot of other spiritual, they talk about transcending the mind, transcending this. Tantra is all about embodiment and healing through breath, movement, and sound. So, for one, you have to be in your body. And our world has been historically a very unsafe place for women to be in their body. And so when you're not in your body, you are disconnected from the needs and wants, the desires of the heart, of the womb, of the body, because you live primarily in your head. That's what our culture really, really values is,
Yeah.
logic thinking, like, oh, she's a boss babe, she's going to be in charge. But like women are doing it in a very masculine way, which is making them even more disconnected from their sensuality and sexuality.
I love that. When you talked about trauma from your past, that involved sexual things, I guess I'd always kind of had it in my brain. Well, I didn't really have sexual trauma in my past. Let's see, I was never raped, and I was not sexually molested by anyone in my family or a stranger. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, that wasn't one of my issues. But after our lunch, I'm going to get real now. I started thinking about it. And I started thinking, well, wait a minute. I was not exempt from this. What about all those neighborhood boys that wanted to touch my breasts? Because as a fat little girl, I happen to have big breasts from like the age 8. And what about those situations? And what about when I learned as a young girl that if I wanted attention from people, from a girl who was starving for attention, that if I pulled up my shirt and showed my breast, that I got attention, as negative and as horrific as that was. But in that time of my life, I didn't recognize it. Now I'm saying, wait a minute, wait a minute. That has tremendous implications for me. It's why, well into my life, if I wanted a man to be attracted to me, I thought he had to be sexually attracted to me. And what did I do and how did I do that? Was that to be standing next to someone. These are during my single years, not during my marriage years. But even during my marriage years, if you wanted to be attention from your husband, did you push your breast up against him? Because that was how I engaged with the opposite sex since I was just little. Crazy kind of stuff. So in your work with people, do you find that most people are aware of sexual trauma or disorientation when they were little, or is it something that they walk into with you?
I think, trauma is a very big buzzword right now, which is great that it's bringing a lot of attention. People are like, it's kind of overused, like, oh, that was so traumatic. And then if you like think there's trauma with a capital T and trauma with a little lowercase t.
Right.
But I think our culture is very designed to blame and to shame. And so people will say, well, I wasn't sexually abused, so I don't have trauma. And it's like, well, did you get bullied? Did your mother diet incessantly and tell you that you need to lose weight? That's actually trauma.
Yeah.
And especially if you think of a 5-year-old. And so, when you're your adult self, you're like, oh, well, I didn't experience any of that. But there's always a little girl or a little boy inside of you that was traumatized, that was only valued if they learn to be. So trauma happens, there's a loss of innocence, and then you create a false sense of being. And this way of being is, this is who I need to be in order to be loved. And I will be this over my authentic self because it is more important for me to get that love, because that is survival for women. It is more important for women to get their emotional needs met than being fed.
Yeah.
Like food, like we would rather get emotionally fed than, physically fed.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of women starving.
And as we look at this problem and how universal it is, for the purpose of this podcast, I probably won't talk much about the worldwide problem, because we all acknowledge that those things happen with sex trafficking and the culture of women being used and abused and mutilated. But what we don't often realize is that it's home. It's here. Mm-hmm. It's with our best friend that we're not aware of. It's with ourselves. Mm-hmm. How do people step into that awareness? And then once they become aware, what do they do with it? Because sometimes people are reluctant to become aware. They're like, no, here's the sand. This is my ostrich head. I'm going to put it in there because I really don't want to know. I've learned how to deal with my dysfunction at this point. I'm getting along just fine. So why would I want to look at it? So what do you encourage people to do?
Well, first that's where being embodied is really important. And there is a lot of safety and false sense of control that is created in this very structured, small way of being. But in my experience with a lot of the people that have come to into my space, is that voice putting your head in the sand, it will get louder. It will get louder and louder and louder until the pain outweighs the way of being. And then you're forced, like illness, death, something will happen for you. I always like to say that life is happening for me. And all of the things that have happened for me have, even though they've been painful at the time, have caused me to be where I'm at. And I know those will continue on my life path. So awareness is the key to change. 95% of everything we do is unconscious. So it does take awareness and a willingness to step back and become the observer of your life, and then look at what you've created, because we create everything from our womb. That is our life source, our creative center. And look at what we've created and be like, is this for me? Am I happy? And we're not going to be happy all the time, but am I fulfilled? Do I have a meaningful life? Or am I just eating vanilla cake my entire life?
And I forgot that there was that beautiful salmon out there.
Yeah.
Since I
Yeah.
don't eat much beef anymore, now I have to talk
Or a
about salmon.
jalapeno.
Yeah.
Or, sometimes it doesn't even have to taste good, but like, because grief can bring you to the greatest access of joy, and like heartache causes you to love so much more fiercely. So we are really afraid of feeling these other emotions. We don't trust ourselves with these emotions, but that is part of the human experience. That's called contrast.
Mm,
Without that, our life is not meaningful. It's not colorful. It's like that movie Pleasantville. It's all in black and white, right?
yeah.
Until you add something that will bring a little color, and that color, even if it's painful, might feel better than the apathy or monotony that you've been in for 20 years.
Yeah. And then sometimes when we flatline, because I always say that you're either, there's no such thing as flatline. You're either growing or you're declining. But I also think that there is that sense, and when we say this word flatline, women can relate that their life has flatlined, that there isn't great joy, but that's okay because there isn't great pain. And so we just stay right here. But eventually that deteriorates. And I talk about that in my book so much, April, that the change happens when the pain of where you are becomes stronger than the fear of changing. And for me, change over my life was so fearful because I was afraid I couldn't do it. What if I failed again? What did that say about me? I'm always this way. I'm always that way. There's no possibility. But when the pain of where I was became so, so bitter that I thought, I've got to change. I want to shift. Mm-hmm. And women who are stuck there in with that flat line, sometimes they don't realize. So I want to share with you a story that has stuck with me for a long time. And that's why I think I want to do this podcast today. This is probably 30 years ago. And I can't remember, I was married at the time, and I was having this discussion with a friend, and we were just joking about sex. Joking. And then I said, I've never been one that have experimented much with sex, but I think I'm going to buy a book. And then she said, I have a question to ask you. And I said, okay. And she said, so like lesbians, how do they know when they're done? What? She says, well, like, do they just get tired and then stop having sex? I'm like, no. It's when they have orgasm. She said, women have orgasms? I go, yeah. Honey, you've been married 15 years. So talk to me about that. She said, I didn't know. Okay.
That's very common.
That is very common. I came to understand after that situation that is way more common than we believe, that the joy of sex comes for women from that intimacy, that closeness, that touching, that holding. And this is what I've discovered, you tell me if it's true or not, that I can actually create that same desire for intimacy, touching, holding, closeness in my male partner if I also experience the other piece, the orgasm piece. And when he gets so much joy out of what I'm experiencing, that creates that peace for him that so many women long for. Well, he just wants to roll over and go to sleep, or, he just wants to get right to it. He doesn't ever realize I just want to be kissing and stuff. And tell me if I'm wrong or not, but we can help our counterparts develop that, right?
Yeah. So there's like two things in there that are really, really important and powerful so women are actually the receivers and men are the givers. So just think about even how the penis works. It goes into the vagina or whatever. They're giving to you. They're giving you the sperm. You're creating life. So we are the receivers and men are the givers. But porn and television will tell you that men are the takers. They are taking from women, and women always have to fight because you don't want to marry a woman that's like that. She's not marriageable, right? The woman that wants to have sex. Like there's all these programs that are
Interesting.
super duper shameful. But you can't tell a man how to pleasure you if you don't have a relationship with yourself. If you don't know your own body, do you know how many women don't even know what their pussy looks like?
Oh,
They have no idea.
because I don't know
They,
if you remember when the show Fried Green Tomatoes came out. That was
yeah,
the first time I ever saw that, where they were in a women's group and they had mirrors and they were looking at themselves.
yeah,
And
yeah,
unless you do that, you physically cannot
yeah. Unless
see
you're
that.
super flexible, which good for you. Yeah, it's a new yoga pose.
Yeah. And to live with a piece of our body for decades and have no idea how it really is put together.
Yeah, and it's for pleasure. Like everything about the clitoris and the legs of the clitoris and the labia, it's all wired specifically for pleasure.
Yeah.
And there's so much pain associated with that part of your body. There's so much shame. There's so much weirdness. Women don't want to talk about it. They don't want to look at it. Oh, it's ugly. There's so much like, oh, it should look like this. Like women are getting surgeries to, and because they don't know what theirs looks like. They don't know what other women's looks like. It's this big thing of like, if your husband watches porn, they want it to look like a certain way. And it's just not realistic. Also, it takes women at least 20 minutes usually to get warmed up.
Yeah.
And it's an invitation. Like, so that means also that there has to be intimacy, connection beforehand, flirting, talking. You know, if the woman doesn't feel safe, she will not open up.
Right.
And then it's a forceful situation. And then, of course, women aren't going to like it. And then there's also all these stereotypes. I did hair for 20 years and all I talked about was sex with my clients. I was like, let's talk about it. Let's get there. Like, and it's just, there's so many women that were like, I really like to have sex a lot more than my husband, but I feel embarrassed. Like there's something wrong with me because most women will say, oh, I have a headache. Oh, I don't want to have sex. And their husband, but it's my wifely duty. My husband wants it or needs it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, where did this come from? How did we get so disconnected from our own embodiment, our own pleasure, that we feel so shameful that we actually have the desire, which is a human physical need. We have a body part wired for pleasure.
Yeah.
Women can have multiple orgasms.
Yeah.
Right? They can have hour-long orgasms through Tantra.
I've never
through
had
breath,
that, but I've
I
had the
haven't
multiple.
either. I'm working on it. I'm working on creating the time to put towards that because, I still have my work to do of like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Instead of like, no, this is like just as important as meditating or exercising as like connecting to that. It actually, that's what creates attraction with the law of attraction is like when you want to manifest things to you, like the most powerful time to manifest is when you're orgasming. And anchoring that, like you can pump your fist while you're orgasming, or if you're going to go be on a stage, like you should orgasm right beforehand and you anchor it. And then when you need to, like, you're on stage, in NLP, they talk about anchoring, you'll just pump your fist and you kind of get that, like, that feeling of like, I feel so good. I feel so beautiful. I'm so in my body. And that's what makes people more attracted to you. And then they want to listen to what you have to say more.
Okay, now that's a big revelation to me. I mean, I'm a public speaker. I talk all the time. I've never thought, listen, I need to make sure I go in the bathroom and have an orgasm before I go on stage. I just never been in my brain.
Well, you can do it at home before you leave your house.
But it will be now.
Your own home. Well, I want to see your before and after talk. And then I'll be like, Mary, she totally had an orgasm before this one. I know she did.
It's interesting. I think one of the things that I think men differ from women this way, but I shared this with John the other day, and I don't ever talk about John and our sexual relationship on this show, but I'm going to open up here. So get ready, kids. When we finally went to bed after spending the whole day together, and I orgasmed like within 5 minutes, and he kind of stood back and he goes, wow, that was quick. And I said, do you know why? And he said, no, by all means, share with me. And I said, because we were making love all day.
Mm-hmm.
And
That just gave me chills.
from breakfast all day, all the things we did together, just touching and holding each other, holding hands, talking about sex, talking about things that we love, about the next trip we're going to take, and holding each other close and laughing together. We literally made love all day long. And so by the time we got to that point, it was like, done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I are men that way? Do they, I mean, they don't need 20 minutes, but can they enjoy the grooming the way we do?
Yeah. So one thing I've really learned with, and I'm not quite an expert yet, but I have researched a lot about sexuality just because I've had, a big healing journey around it. And one thing I learned with Tantra is everyone is wired a little differently, but everyone has masculine and feminine
Right.
energies. And so, like women who identify as women, they still have the masculine energy. They still have and men who are wired as men or masculine, they still have the feminine energy, which is about emotions and connection.
Right.
Physically, depending on how men are wired, like men who identify as men and are more in their masculine energy, they will generally be able to have an orgasm really quickly just because of the way the penis is wired, and they're not as in touch with their emotions naturally. They're not programmed. Like women are programmed to be very empathetic and connective, and we're the mothers and we're the gatherers. Whereas men, the only
Mm.
emotion that's really safe for them to express is anger, or
Ah,
they're they're gay, or they're too soft, or there's a whole story about the toxic masculine energy as well that gets to be healed, that we all get to heal our own masculine and our own feminine. But so it just depends on the person that's wired, and that's where in tantra, like making marriage agreements, so if you think of like the traditional marriage ceremony, it's for better or for worse till death do us part kind of a thing. And it's very limiting because it's like, even if you treat me like I'm saying for better or for worse, I'm going to stay in this. But then that's what happens is people, they'll be married 7
yeah.
years and then they'll be like, the spark's gone. And it's like, well, you didn't put any energy or effort into your marriage. You have been working 50 hours a week, and then you do this, and then you come home and your wife or husband gets the leftover part of you. And so if you put as much time into your marriage as you did into your business, there would be no end of a marriage, because it's all about creating connection, creating the
Ah.
container. So my husband is wired a little bit differently. He does need that connection as well.
Oh,
And
yeah. Okay,
I
so
was wired more masculine, so
I
we were a
think that
little
that's
different.
probably the question that's running around, at least in
Yeah.
the women's that are, and probably the men too. Is okay. So how do I teach that or model that or talk to my partner about that piece that is so important to me? Because women tend to not talk about sex with their partners.
Hmm. Yeah.
And from the get-go, was just open about it with John. And even this last weekend, we're getting older. John's 72, I'm 69. So things don't always go quite the way that we anticipate. And to be able to have that open discussion of like,
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk about that. And so I think women want that kind. How does a woman go about that?
Well,
Or how does
again,
the
first,
man get his wife to talk about it?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot and a tremendous amount of vulnerability and trust and safety that needs to be created in a container. So for my husband and I, we have connection nights. We do them the tantra way, which is I put my hand on his heart, he puts his hand on my heart. We make eye contact into the left eye, which is the receiving eye, and we do that for 10 to 20 minutes. And just doing that for 10 minutes a day will make you so much more intimate together and so much more connected. And it's
Wow.
funny because when I suggest that to people, they get really uncomfortable. And I'm like, his penis is going to be inside of you, but you can't make eye contact with him. That's a problem. Like, I think that that's a little backwards, but I understand. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I couldn't do that. That's so uncomfortable. I'm like, but you have sex with him.
Yeah.
So we do that, and then this is where the agreements happen.
Here and
Yeah, so you put
here.
your hand, so he puts his hand on your heart, you put his hand, and you sync up
Left,
your breath.
left hand, right hand.
Um, yeah, it doesn't matter which
Okay.
hand. I usually do my left
Okay.
because again, receiving hand. And then like even we could just try it right now and you can see connection. Like, so let's breathe together. And you can just feel your hearts connecting. And heart math is a very awesome science that is coming out. And the heart is 90 times more intelligent than your brain. And the heart develops first in the body, in
Yeah.
the baby, before the brain does. And your heart, there's this old saying from Native Americans of the journey of a lifetime is from the head to the heart. And the head has many things it thinks will make you happy. The heart has but a few. And so
Ah.
learning to live a heart-centered life, learning to live from our hearts and having that connection of, and so the big thing for me was, and I did almost go through a divorce last year because I just felt very disconnected. I was just very disconnected from my own sexuality because of sexual trauma that I had on my healing journey remembered, that had been kind of running the show, but it wasn't in my awareness. And now it's in my
Mm.
awareness. And then feeling all these walls of armor come up and like, I don't want to do this. And it is easier sometimes to be like, to start over than to repair something. So, you
It's
know,
always that the grass is greener over there, and if
yeah,
I have a different partner, I'll be able to do it because we don't want to look in. We don't. We're so afraid of healing. Isn't that the
yeah,
craziest thing that we're afraid of healing?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very vulnerable.
Okay, so I'm really intrigued with this. I want to do this with John. So
Yeah.
tell me, how do you spell this word you keep saying, entran?
Oh, Tantra.
Tantra.
Tantra. Mm-hmm.
Tantra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so
Tantra.
receiving, looking into the left eye.
Yeah. And then you'll ask. So after you connect, then you'll ask, one of you will go first. So you take turns giving and receiving.
Mm.
So one of you will be like, you're going to give, you're going to receive. This is like how our intimacy nights go. And then I'll say, what's real for you right now? And then he can say, I had a really hard day at work. My body doesn't feel
Mm.
good. I'm super nervous. And then I ask, how can I support you? And he might be like, could you just like tickle my back and just like help me get into my body? Can you just, do
Yeah.
that, whatever, or just play with my hair? Or sometimes he's like, I just need to cry. Can you just hold me while I cry? I've had a really week. And I'll just like be that safe container for him.
Hmm.
And then vice versa. Like for me, like the best way to heal sexual trauma is in a relationship, in a sexual container.
Ah.
And it took me a long time to figure out that sexuality is spirituality. They are not separate. They are one part of me. They are both. They always say that the one separated into the two to have the experience of becoming one again.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah. And so the becoming one again is the soul union, the higher self. So there's procreational sex, there's uh, sex. I'll have to bleep that out. I don't know enough different way to say that. And then there's soul level making love sex.
I call that
So
just that, passionate sex. That,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so that's where like your souls meet at a higher consciousness with all the armor down, the true essence of who you are, fully open to receive, and the yin and
Mhm.
yang coming together and creating oneness. And it's a very spiritual, sacred experience. And that's where like I think a lot of couples, if they could just get to that point of letting their partner, so in relationship you're healing all of your childhood trauma together. So if you haven't done the work, and then you just, there's lots of people who've been divorced 2 or 3 times and they're trying to find a different partner, but you always will find a partner that is a that's going to help you heal what you haven't healed in childhood. So there are always going to be those trauma bonds, those attachments, those attractions for you to come together to heal that. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
really sitting with your version of the truth and letting them have their version of the truth. And that's also hard for people to do because the ego and the small self wants to be right, because it's like death to some people if they're not right or if they're not doing it right. There's all this rightness. And then that's where the shame and the blame culture happen again. And so just being like,
Yeah.
this is my truth and this is how I see it. And then he could say, that's not how I see it. That's not how I experience it. This is my truth. And then together we decide how to create a bridge between our truths. But there's a lot of like observation and getting out of your own way and like letting that person have that truth, which they could be. So I'll share something super vulnerable. My husband, like when we were like working with our tantra coach, he would be like, April has a pattern. She like, I used to have like really struggles with alcohol for a few years. And not that I would drink every night, but when I would drink, as soon as I would drink, I would have to just get wasted.
Yeah.
Because I bartended for a long time. I was numbing myself, right? So that's where you don't want to feel these feelings. And so there's all sorts of beautiful things that people use. I don't think they're beautiful, but they're packaged very beautiful. Alcohol, Adderall, weed, TV, working too much. There's all these little things that keep you from expressing the core of who you are.
Coping with
And so,
your hurt.
yes, yeah. And so when we were like working through our truths, he would say, well, April has a pattern of she likes to get drunk and then she wants to come home and have sex in this very specific way. And he's like, and I can tell it's a trauma pattern and I don't want to participate in it. And I was like, holy crap. Like it hit like my gut and my heart. I was just like, and I could see instantly that that was true. But I had no awareness of it for a long time. And for him to be able to say that and for me to be able to receive that was very powerful for our relationship of like, I didn't know that I'd been being like that, you know? And then from there, we like, the truth was on the table. And then we could look at it and unpack it together of like, oh, okay, well, I have that because, you know, I got sexually abused at 5 and then I got like date raped in my 20s. And so like, I have this program that's what love means, is to have sex in this super aggressive way. That's like a program that I have. And so teaching myself that like learning to love myself and that I don't need anything outside of me. That's like always where the work starts, is like, if you're looking for your partner to make you feel sexy or to make you feel desired or to make love to you, instead of you embodying, I am a divine goddess, I am a sexual spiritual being, and it is safe for me to be sexy because I create my own safety, then I can just come to him with a sacred union instead of, I need you to give me all of this so that I feel this way. And that really changes the relationship.
So many thoughts were going through my brain when you were saying that. First of all, you know, I honor your husband for his vulnerability to say that, because not knowing, you know, how you might react to that. At other times, there may have been anger. At other times, there may have been denial. There, you know, all sorts of things. But to be able to offer it to you and in a non-judgmental way, this is what is happening, and not judging it, that's awful, or, you know, I actually love that, or, you know, but to just state in a non-judgmental way with the desired outcome of healing. So powerful for you.
Yeah,
Wow.
It was the moment that I knew that we were going to be okay. We were on the verge of a divorce, and him sharing that with me, I was like, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like being committed then to myself instead of being committed to the marriage was also very healing for both of us. So before, I was always committed to him because I loved him so much and he was so good for me and all of these things. And then I got to a point where I was like, I need to be committed to me first. And then if this marriage works with me being committed to myself, then that's great.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women, that's a very hard place to get to.
I've never even heard of this contra coaching thing. Like, is that what you do now?
I do not do that yet. I'm more into so my little sister does do womb work, and she does do a lot of trauma healing with womb work.
Yeah.
I do just like ceremonies of like helping people connect, nonviolent communication, teaching pleasure. I do host. So I have this amazing lady in California that's who we coach with, and she comes out here twice a year, and I have a cabin, and I'll just gather some of my women friends, and we'll get together. We're doing one in March. She's actually coming up here, and so I do stuff with her, and then I teach breath work. I'm more on to right now teaching like the trauma part of it, of like healing the trauma, connecting to yourself, honoring your own agreements, creating safety for yourself. But I imagine I'm really headed in that direction because I'm getting so many couples coming to me, which I always have worked with women. And now I'm getting couples like working to me like, oh, I want to learn how to connect to my partner in that way. And da 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 da. So I have a feeling that's kind of where I'm headed, but I'm also just kind of taking the path one step at a time, and like really being in the divine flow of like, I retired, I did hair for 20 years. I own 5 hair salons. I never thought I'd be doing all of this. I retired last year and just kind of gave myself a year to like discover my pleasure and my healing. And that's just where my path led me to. So
I love that. And now to enhance what's next for you, I understand you're taking a trip to Scotland.
I am.
Tell me about that.
So so there's a really good book called Pussy the Reclamation. And
I had someone recommend that to me the other day.
Yeah. It's very empowering, all about reclaiming the word and reclaiming your goddesshood and reclaiming your power. And when I think of how liberating that feels to be in your sovereignty, I always think of freedom. And when I think of freedom, I think of Scotland, because they have fought so hard for their freedom. And they would all rather die free men and women than be under British rule. For like centuries this happened. And part of, the healing work that I do, a lot of people will always say, like, you got to do the work, you got to do the work, you got to do the work. And it's like, yes, part of the work is play. And that's and pleasure. So this is what Tantra teaches there's a story that's created, and in neurolinguistic programming and working with your unconscious mind, whatever you tell yourself is what you get. So if you keep saying, I have to do the work, I have to do the work, I got to do the work, I got to do the work, we're doing the work, this is so hard, why is this so hard? Then that's what you will keep getting.
That's what you'll get, yeah.
Yeah, and I really like to reframe it to like, I got to do the play. I got to do the play, I got to do the play, I got to do the pleasure. Like, what feels good to me? What does she want to do? Like, talking to my womb. My womb's name is Lilith. We did drum journeys. We do like, I didn't know that was like the first wife of Adam who wouldn't submit to a man. And so my friend was like, of course, that's your womb's name. I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing when I had it. But so yes, I'm taking 10 women to Scotland, and we're doing an Outlander retreat, and it's very experiential. So we are in a castle. We have a chef who's an actor. He's called the Kilted Chef. He's a real chef, but he just happens to be an actor. So we are going to do a time travel day. I have all these costumes made from the movie. We're going to get our hair and makeup done.
Wow.
And we're just going to like be in pleasure and have like a goddess bath. Like, it's very goddessy. We are going to go to the Standing Stones and do like Celtic goddess energy, and just really connecting to when women were goddesses, they were priestesses, they were like worshipped, and reconnecting to that energy, I think, is super important for women.
Yeah. And I love that there's definitely this sense on our planet of that women are reclaiming their position of honorment and power and that goddess energy. For so long, we have, as women, been downtrodden and used, abused, whatever word you want to put in there, women have experienced it.
Mhm.
And so then, when I went to high school and college in the 70s, of course, then you had this swing the other
Mhm.
direction.
Yep.
Women are power, women
Yeah.
are, and men,
In a very masculine
yeah,
way.
we
Yep.
hate men have downtrodden.
Yeah.
Oh, and that never felt right to me.
Yeah.
But then to kind of, I see that now we're coming more to this level place of just honoring who we are and what our power is. That it's
Mhm.
not masculine power, but what a beautiful place to begin to heal our planet from this
Mhm.
position of loving and nurturing and caring and insightful and all those things that we associate with women and their qualities and why they are the ones that birth and care for those newborns. That just, that is part of our power, our infinite being. And to be able to honor that is healing this planet. It's
Yeah. And
it's incredible.
I mean, that's what they always say, Western women will heal the world. And there's a really good book called Radical Forgiveness, or I'll have to look up the name of it. But she says something in there because I'm preparing to do a TED talk on saying no and boundaries on, and I found this book. She said Gandhi didn't free the people of India he didn't go to Britain and say stop making us be slaves, stop making us be slaves, stop making us be slaves. He went to the people of India and said stop acting like
Ah,
slaves. And that's like for women, like men aren't doing anything to us. That keeps us in victim. And as long as you're in victim, you
yeah,
cannot be in sovereignty. And so that is what is happening is women are saying, this is actually always mine by birthright and no one can take it from me. It's me. It's who I am.
yeah,
You can't take my essence of who I am. It's reclaiming your body, your power, your sensuality, your sacred container. And no one can take that from you because that is who you are. And so
yeah,
that is really what is coming up right now, and it's so beautiful. So I
yeah.
love that you brought that to the end. Yeah.
April, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
opening this beautiful can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
And to discover, I mean, like, look at me at the age that I am, and to be discovering a whole different kind of sexual engagement with someone that
Yes.
I've never had my entire life. And so it's like, okay, it's never too late, and nothing
It's
is
not.
impossible. Whether you think, okay, I'm in this marriage and, Mary got a new partner, that's why she's lucky. No, it doesn't have to be that way. You can
Yeah.
reclaim that within your own marriage and keep the bounds and the bonds that you already have. And
Yeah.
so thank you for like opening that door up. We've included at the end of this podcast your Instagram handle as well as your website. Now I know your website doesn't talk a lot about sex, but that's kind of coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
of all the different
Yeah.
things people can do there. You're waiting till after you get your photos back from Scotland, aren't you? I know
Yeah,
you.
I
You're
am.
waiting for
Yeah,
those.
I am. I am doing a very goddessy shoot. Yes. And I just want to say really quick, Mary, thank you for being willing to talk about this and using your
Yeah.
platform. And because what women really need is a model. And if
Mm.
we don't have a model, uh, like we can always create it ourselves, but sometimes you just need a good model of what does an empowered woman look like? What does someone who lives from her heart, who's generous, who's kind, who's having this amazing sex, like in years that people would think that you
Yeah.
should, and why not? Like you are being such a good model and like breaking glass
Mm.
ceilings for so many women with just even
Mm.
saying what you shared on this. So thank you for doing that for all women. Thank you.
Well, if I can't be vulnerable, if I can't be real, how can I ask that of someone else? And so that's why you and I both shared from our hearts, from our past, from our sorrows, from our joys, and that is the platform we offer all women of what is possible. And thank you for being with me and helping women and men. I don't want to just leave it to women. Craft our meaningful life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.